Welcome to the next episode of the What the World Needs Now series of the Moonchild Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm speaking to the wonderful and always happy Dr. Robert Puff on happiness. Welcome to the Moonchild Podcast with Miriam Maris. In this podcast, I'm taking you along on my path, shifting my own consciousness and living my life to the fullest, but at my own pace. Front row living, that is my goal, becoming the ultimate version of me. Ever since I was little, I always loved the energy of the moon. It feels soothing, it's slowing me down, and it's making me realize what's actually important to me. Love, connection, and freedom. So welcome. I hope you feel at home and inspired. Enjoy this ride with me. So welcome to the What the World Needs Now series of the Moonchild Podcast Show. And this episode is all about happiness. And I'm speaking today to Dr. Robert Puff, all the way from Newport Beach in California. And he has written 13 books, and I'm going to mention just a couple. Finding Our Happiness Flow, How to Express Your Anger and Still Be Kind, How to Live a Positive Life, and The Art of Living Well. And he's a host of the Happiness Podcast. And Dr. Puff, I've known you through Zestology, podcast by Tony Wrighton. And afterwards, I started listening to your podcast. So I'm really happy to have you on my show today.
I'm very glad to be here.
Wonderful. Now, you teach people how to be holistically successful. Can you tell me a little bit more about your work?
Yeah, I work both with individuals and companies and couples and just all types of people. And I what I've found over the years is I think there's a tendency to people to specialize and to focus on maybe one or two things. And I have found that it's kind of like I often compare physical health with psychological health. You know, you can be maybe physically strong, but eating lots of high like fats, and you may not be as healthy as you could be. And it's the same way with that. Or you could be cardiovascular, like really strong with your heart, but not be very flexible. So you have to worry about injuries. So I find what works better is keeping a regular check-in, and not just how am I doing, maybe success-wise or paycheck-wise or relationship-wise or physical-wise, but how am I doing overall? And that's a broader spectrum, because I think there's a real tendency for people to focus on one or two areas. Let's say, for example, their career is very important to them, and they may sacrifice, their personal health for that, or perhaps their marriage, like what you do. People's marriages can be very important to them, but in the process, they sacrifice their own personal well-being, and so they kind of lose themselves in the marriage.
Yeah.
So I think it's important in life to I call it check-in. Like, one of my favorite words is awareness.
Mm-hmm.
When we're aware of things, we have a lot better time of knowing what to do and what to change, but we get so busy in our lives and we're so active that we just don't check in. And I really feel it's time to pause. I mean, meditation, of course, is one of the good ones for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I've been meditating for 35 years, so I do like meditation, but just being in nature, slowing down, setting aside time to just pause. I think those pauses can really help us to know what we need. Because I think when we check in, there's a good concept of what do we need. We have a good idea of what we need when we're aware. But when we're not aware, when the awareness isn't there, we can really get lost in whatever we're focused on at the expense of other things that really matter. So.
Yeah, I relate to that. And I read on your website that you said that we need to take specific actions in our lives to create happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share some of those specific actions in your opinion?
Yeah, a lot of life is, there's kind of two parts to it. We have our dreams, we have our desires, we have the things that we want, we have our expectations based upon what our parents modeled for us, both good and bad. We can look at our parents and say, wow, I really want what they had. Or we can look at our parents and say, I don't really want that. I want something different. But we have expectations. We may want children. We may want to have a wonderful career. We may want to grow old and live healthy throughout our lives. But then this thing called life happens. And life doesn't always give us what we want, because there's not a lot of things that we may necessarily be in control over. I mean, like we don't always know that when we're driving home and the drunk driver, hits us out of a car. We don't always have control over that. Or if we have a genetic predisposition towards like some disease, we don't always know that. And so what helps us move towards happiness is it's really two things. One is, yes, working towards things that will improve our lives. But when we've done what we've done and things are still going a certain way, there's a sense of acceptance. There's a sense of saying, okay, I've done everything that I can, and I wish this were different. But if I want to be happy, I have to accept this for what it is. Now, tomorrow may be different, but today, right now, it's a lot about accepting and living in the moment, saying, if I've done everything that I can do to create the life that I'm having for myself, and it isn't going the way that I like, then I need to work towards changing my expectations, saying, okay, this isn't what I like, and I will continue to try to improve it. But so often what we do is we're so much focused on change and wanting things better or wishing things are different that we really miss out on living now. And what I try to teach people is, again, it's nothing wrong with improvement, but you really want to focus on, how do I live well today? And again, that comes from just doing things that at the end of doing them, they put a smile on your heart. They make it so life is good. When you look back on that day, you say, that was a good day. So again, I think what catches us is we often are in our head. We're thinking about things. We're worried about things. We're fearful. And all those thoughts keep us from living in the now. And right now, if we really pause, right now, there's often many beautiful things or good things that we can focus on.
Mm-hmm.
But if we do focus on, if there's 10 things in the room, and we focus on something that's perhaps, out of place or causes us distress, then that's what our energies are going to create, that distress. The same way in our mind, if we have 20 beautiful things happening in our life, but we got fired from our job, or we're going through a divorce, or we have this health concern, or we're wishing fill in the blank, then all those things keep us from not focusing on the 20 things in our lives that are beautiful. So we suffer because of what we focus on. And so what I try to teach people is that when you change the focus, it isn't that you can't create change, but when you've done what you need to do to create change, and life says, but this is what you have today, then the biggest thing I try to teach, and I end every one of my podcasts, I end this phrase with it. It's really one of the key aspects of happiness, is learning to, one, accept what is, but ultimately loving what is. And when we love what is, after we've done everything in our power to create change, if we want things to be different, then what happens is peace settles in. And we get good in our heart, because we realize that, oh, okay, I know now that I've done everything that I can to make this work, and it's not, and that's okay. Can I use an example? I think that would be helpful. I was once flying back from Italy, and when I first got to the airport, my initial flight was already completely messed up. So they suggested me to go a different route, which I did. And when I got to the next airport, it too was messed up. And so I had to take a different flight. And then that flight was going to fly into called Phoenix. Phoenix was a short stop before I came home. But where I live in Orange County, they only let you fly into like 10 p.m. So when we landed into Phoenix, we had to really get to the port. We had ample time to get to the portal, let people off, and then take off. When we landed, they wouldn't let the plane hook up to the portal. So we stood there for like 45 minutes, and I knew when we pulled in, I was going to be spending the night in Arizona. So I'm very sure I'd flown longer than anyone else on that plane all day. But I said, well, I wouldn't really like to be home. I've been gone for 2 weeks, but this is where I'm going to spend the night. So I got off the plane, I got my hotel room, and went to my hotel room. But I'm observant. I noticed that almost everyone in line was very angry, even though there was nothing they could do about it, because we were all going to spend the night in Phoenix. So life is a lot like that. It's like, if this is what life has given me, and we put a smile on our hearts and we say, okay, I can do this, and life goes better.
I totally agree with you. Thank you. That's a beautiful story. So it's about peace and a smile on your heart, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that what keeps us from that is that we're always wishing things were better. It's kind
Mm.
of like we're wishing that we had less of this and more of that. What happens is actually where it begins is when we're 2 years old. We have things called desires and we have things called fear. We have good things that happen. So we have chocolate. We really like chocolate. I want more of chocolate. So our ego kicks in and says, let's make sure we get a lot of chocolate in life. And we have bad things that happen. Say we don't like sunburns, so we're going to say we're going to really make sure we don't get sunburns. So between those two fears and desires, we are constantly doing this war with life. I want this. I don't want this. I want this. I don't want this. But in the process of doing that, we lose that childlike just joy of life. And so we stop just enjoying the beauty of life. And so when we can stop spending so much time in our fears and desires and more focus on living in the present moment, then what happens? And again, as we're talking about, that peace begins to settle in.
Right. And how do we actually do that, live in the present moment?
Well, it's hard, but it's
Uh-huh.
worth it. So it is hard. I won't negate that, but it's hard in the sense that it just goes against our conditioning. So our conditioning teaches us, like again, getting back to my example with young children, at a very young age, we really do want certain things, but in the process of wanting them and not wanting others, we suffer. So, and then what happens is the media out there, the world, kind of marketers have realized that, oh, I can prey on those two emotions, fear and desires. So if we watch television, if we watch movies, if we get on our social media, they're going to constantly by bombarding us with, you want this and you better not have that. You want to keep away from that. You want to have this. And that encourages the purchase thing. That creates a sense of, I'm unhappy with what I have right now, so I need to make things different. So it really feeds on that sense of we're wishing things were different and we want things different. Let's say right now we're in an unhappy marriage, because I know you work with marriages,
Mhm.
and we're going to do everything in our power during that time to try to make it better. But we may, because it takes two people, as you know, to make a marriage work, we may not be able to make much change with our partner. So then we have to ask ourselves, okay, right now, today, I'm still with this person. So how do I today make this a beautiful day? That may mean that I don't spend as much time with him as I normally would trying to fix it. I'm going to go outside, spend time in nature, enjoy the people that I do enjoy. And when I do need to deal with them, I'll keep them short. Or her, could be her, of course, I'll keep them short and to the point. But mostly, I'm going to focus throughout my day on being present. And the way we're present is when we notice our minds are either going to the past, kind of regretful of things that have happened, or going to the future, wishing things were different. What we do is that we say, okay, I can't really affect change with that right now, because most things we can't change very much. It takes time to change things. So most of the time, we should spend living in the now. So when our mind goes to the future or back to the past, we say, oh yeah, awareness. Remember I talked about awareness earlier? We're aware that our minds are wandering, and then we get back to the now. And then again, we notice, oh, I'm starting to worry about this concern again. So, but right now, that concern isn't happening. So get back to the now. I'm with my children. I'm going for a walk. I'm making dinner. I'm having a really relaxing time, at work. I like my work, whatever it may be. So those are the things we focus more on. And then it isn't that we don't affect change. Of course, absolutely. We do things to affect change. But it's like my airplane example. We have to ask ourselves, is this something I can do about right now? Or do I just need to kind of lay my head down and relax? Now, the relaxing can be boundaries, of course. I mean, I realize, I think when people are in relationships that are abusive, we may get the police involved. We may be part of support groups. But even most of the instances that cause us the greatest amount of suffering typically are very narrow. What I mean by that is, think of a horrible experience like rape. Rape is a very bad experience, of course. But what causes people to suffer is the reliving it over and over again. And what we want to do, we want to say, I don't want to let that experience destroy my life. I'm going to work through it. I'm going to get better. I'm going to heal. And I'm not going to let that person who caused me that damage to keep hurting me. So a lot of it is saying, okay, that was in the past. I've worked through my feelings. And mostly, this always goes back to mostly what's happening right now. So when we're eating our meal, we're eating our meal. When we're having conversations, we're listening. We're giving our complete attention to the other person. When we're going for a walk, we're going for a walk. It really gets back to being mindful or present in the moment. And when we notice that our mind is, again, going to the future or perseverating in the past, we get back to the here and now.
Right. It's actually what I teach most of my clients to stop reliving that same experience. And I'm not talking about rape, but in general,
Right.
stop living that same story over and over again in your mind so that it'll take you out of the now. Exactly.
Mhm.
So, um, how do we actually create or find or maintain that happy flow, especially in Corona times, since we're all, a little bit stuck in our homes?
Mhm.
Do you have any suggestions on that, what we can do right now to find that happy flow?
Well, to be honest, the number one thing I would suggest is limit your exposure to the coronavirus via the media. Because whenever, think about the example, let me use a good example. Again, getting back to when bad things happen. Here in the United States, we have been at war for a very long time. And so a lot of these veterans are coming back with what's called post-traumatic stress disorder.
Hmm.
And, we interview them as psychologists, we'll interview them. And when the ones come back with it, which are most of them, we ask them, well, what are you thinking about all day long when you're about your day? And the person will say, I'm thinking about what happened and all the horrible things I saw and experienced. But some come back and they're totally fine. They actually have very little stress over it and they live their lives well. And we ask them the same question. And we ask them, what do you think about? I don't really think about the war at all. I just moved on with my life. So the coronavirus, of course, is affecting us. But in any situation, whether it's coronavirus, whether it's divorce, whether it's a health concern, again, it really doesn't require much of our time. I mean, most of what we do is regurgitate things. We just we go over them again and again and again, and that causes suffering. So, of course, we want to be informed, but we can be very well informed with, say, getting on our phone and look at our apps on news. In 15 minutes a day, we could be pretty well informed of a lot of what's going on in the world. What causes us to suffer is when we think about all the images that we see in the news, or we think about what might happen or could happen. I mean, and that's where we begin to suffer. So part of it is not overexposing ourselves to things that are negative. I think that is causing, to be honest, most of the suffering, the mental
Absolutely.
suffering that's happening in the world.
Hmm.
The next thing is to say, okay, we are home. And so if we're home, then we say, well, how do I make this experience as beautiful as possible? Like, am I allowed to walk in my backyard? Am I allowed, where I'm living, do they allow me to, go for walks? Do they allow me to just bring sunshine in? Maybe when I go to the store, bringing home some flowers back into my house. Or, again, just connecting with people. A lot of it is, one of the things I do on a regular basis is I like to go on retreats. And they're typically silent retreats by myself, where I'll go somewhere for a weekend or a week, quite often, I mean, several times a year, where I don't speak at all. And those are often my most exquisite times that I have. I'm not speaking to anyone. I'm not really talking to anyone. And I'm by myself for an entire, weekend or week. And I choose to do that because I find those the most beautiful experiences that I can have. So in many ways, we can always have beautiful experiences. It isn't the experience that keeps it from us. It's where our mind goes. So think of, again, I like to use extreme examples because they're helpful. Think of someone like in a hospital who's like going through a severe medical condition. And most people, mind you, in the hospital will struggle. Like most people getting off the plane example that I used earlier, they'll struggle. But I have spent, many, many years working in and out of hospitals, and you'll always meet those people that are like, I'm glad I'm here. And I'm listening to the birds singing outside. I'm enjoying the flowers that everyone's brought me. I'm really enjoying the people that are coming to visit me. So we are magnificent at finding beauty in almost any situations. I would actually argue all situations. So what we need to do is pause and say, okay, there may be 10 things out there that I don't like, but I bet I can find one or two things that are magnificent.
Hmm.
And when we focus on those things that are beautiful, then what that creates in our heart is happiness and peace. So right now, most of us, I mean, this virus, of course, is dangerous, but its mathematical numbers, I'm a math guy, are very small. It's very unlikely as a person, that we're going to be affected by that. And that's true in a lot of life. Most of our fears are just that, fears. They rarely come to fruition. So if we don't give energy to our fears, then instead focus on what's before us and what's beautiful. It was funny. I saw a beautiful post the other day. Near my home is a town called Riverside, and it was a dog shelter where every dog had been adopted during this time because people were realizing, I'm home, I want to have a dog with me. And I think, it's things like that that we can do. Like, how can we creatively use the time to be well? And again, even when we watch, I know a lot of people are like kind of binge watching, but I would even there say, does this feed my soul, or is it something that is not maybe feed my soul? I often think psychology is a lot like nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
So, we can eat apples and oranges, or we can have deep fried food and, like sweets. It's like, well, it might be better for us to eat apples and oranges than, fried food all the time. So think of that, whatever we expose ourselves to matters. So if you're spending your time, watching shows that are making fun of people or have a lot of violence or a lot of kind of a drama in them or trauma, it may not be as good for your soul as reading an uplifting book, listening like your podcast, or things like that people can be really uplifted. That's how we use our time well. And we do know through my research and my experience of helping people for 35 years that people do well really steep themselves in positive fruits and vegetables.
Right. So it's actually about making a choice, right?
It is all about making a choice. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Mhm. It's
Thank you.
hard because our minds really, we like the crazy stuff. We think it's fun, but once in a while having a glass of wine is a whole lot different than drinking a bottle every night. Once in a while having a piece of chocolate is a whole lot different than eating chocolate all the time. Once in a while watching a drama on TV is a whole lot different than just constantly exposing yourself to upsetness. So just limit it and try to say, what's feeding my soul,
Right.
and do those things instead.
Right. I'm always talking about what fills you up instead of what drains you out. I mean, you can binge watch all night, but at the end of the night, you won't be any happier or filled up, if you know what I mean. You won't be
I
any
do know.
bigger than when you started, right?
Mhm.
So, do you have any tips for people who are really struggling in their marriages or relationships at home right now because they're all in there together?
Right. I think again, can we can be with someone, and two things that are very helpful for me. One is when someone is causing a struggle, we have to say, I know what they're doing is causing me struggle. But another way to look at it is saying, is there a way for me to see them perhaps as my teacher? Let me explain what I mean by that. It does, again, I always want to preface this. It doesn't mean we can't absolutely set boundaries. We can talk to people, we can do things that we need to do to make sure we're safe, but also seeing it as, am I in any way participating in the things that are happening? Or am I in any way causing this upsetness with my partner or whoever I'm living with to be worse? I mean, like little kids, I don't know if you raise children, but, I have children, but I remember when my kids were younger, if my son pushed my daughter or my daughter did something to my son, they'd always say, well, she did it first.
Right.
So your hope is that we outgrow that, but we often don't. So what I have found is, and I think you'll find this true too, because I've spent my whole life trying to find the most amazing people I can find. It's that people that live life amazingly, when someone is rude to them, when someone is caustic towards them, they aren't rude and caustic back. That's really
Right.
the key essential. They set boundaries, say, I'm not putting up with this. I'm going to go to the other room. You stay away from me. But they don't say mean and hurtful things back. So I think
Right.
that's number one. Don't enter that world. Don't, when the mud is being thrown at you, don't throw it back. That will make you sad. That's the
Mhm.
one thing I've learned to core my being, that people that aren't very kind are typically very unhappy.
Right.
So if we're kind with boundaries, we do better. And I think the other thing is the one thing that we can control is our own behavior, and this kind of ties with the first thing that I said. We can control us. We can't control what anyone else does. So what we're going to do is say, okay, this is making me miserable. This is making it hard for me. What could I do differently? I can't change them, but I can change me. I can go to a different part of the house. I can dive into a book and read it. I can, maybe go for a walk. There are a lot of things we can always do, but I think what we tend to do is get caught up in the drama instead of like saying, okay, what can I do to make myself better right now? And that's what we focus on. There's really not much we can do a lot really with other people besides perhaps setting boundaries and telling them how we feel. But mostly what we can focus on is on our own happiness that we have control over. So that's what we focus on. What would put a smile on my heart? Perhaps, when everyone eats together, they're yelling at each other. Maybe I'll remove myself when that's happening. Instead, just sit in the backyard if I have a backyard and enjoy, the air blowing and being outside. Perhaps I'll find a really good book or a great podcast to listen to. Perhaps I'll just do things right now that will feed my soul, because there's just always things that can feed our soul, but we have to choose them, or we can engage in the negativity. And if you sense that people around you being negative, as much as we may isolate ourselves from the news, we may need to isolate ourselves, not from them, but from when they go on the tangent of talking negative. So I have people that I like to connect with every week. When I find they start going on like political tangents or something like that, I often will change the subject because I don't want to hear things like that. So it's a bit of that. We control what we can. Or I'll say I'll have to go if I know they're going to continue. I'll say, okay, I'll talk to you later. We just move on. So it isn't that we can necessarily make people different, but what we can do is kind of affect the flow of things. And I think, or sometimes that means just removing ourselves from the situation. So,
Right.
And we can do things like this. We can get on our phones. We can get on Zoom, Skype, FaceTime. There's so many options, but we can still connect with people that are like us, wanting to be happy, wanting to be healthy. There's so many support groups online right now. There's therapists doing things online. There's many options available to us. We just need to seek them, and that can make our lives better.
Right. So it's about making choices, right? Can I see my partner as a teacher, and what can I do differently? And it's ultimately about making that choice of not to go into the negativity and stay connected to you, right?
Right. Exactly. Yep.
Right. Thank you so much. It's actually the core of my program too. So I'm always happy when someone, is into the same stuff as I am.
Wow.
So as a final question, do you have one book you can recommend that people can read if they want to know more about how to become happy, especially in relationships, but also to be happy in their own core?
Yeah, Finding Our Happiness Flow would be the one I'd suggest most importantly for that. And then again, my happiness podcast too is a good one, because there's 270 episodes, or
I saw
they're
it.
short. Yeah. There's a lot of them, so
I know.
they're easy to listen to too. So, and they're like, I think they're much like yours, like 10, 20 minutes long. So
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Puff. It was lovely to
pleasure.
speak to you.
You too.
And I will put a link to your happiness podcast in this video. So thank you very much for your time. For more info, you can always check my website, Miriam with a J, Maris.com, or Google for Maris Coaching. I hope to see you soon. Bye.